Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5 trailer video. Most of it looks like it deals with the direct aftermath of Episode 4, the battle at Rook's Rest. RIP to a whole bunch of people, and Aegon looks about as bad as Viserys got towards the end of his life. Aemond looking to take over his duties and ruling the realm as Lord Protector and Regent. That was what that whole ending scene from Episode 4 was about, him holding the Valyrian dagger, basically what you pass down from king to king, along with Aegon the Conqueror's sword, Blackfyre, but obviously that's too big for him to carry into battle. So on the show, because they want to connect this with Game of Thrones on a more Easter egg kind of level, so the people that watch the original show will watch this and recognize that they're just using that as sort of the sign that's passed down from king to king, and using that because of the whole through line of the prophecy of A Song of Ice and Fire, Aegon's prophecy, which Rhaenyra just told to Jace.
Aegon the Conqueror's dream. He called it The Song of Ice and Fire.
So do not be surprised if you actually see Aemond walking around with the Valyrian dagger on his hip for the rest of the season. That episode basically turned Criston Cole into the Kingmaker, fulfilling his name. People have been calling him the Kingmaker. Now he technically is the Kingmaker because he kind of made Aemond king inadvertently. And Aemond almost wound up turning himself into the Kingslayer for his actions during the battle too. Jaime Lannister would be proud. There's a bunch of stuff going on here, a bunch of Easter eggs and references to the books, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Just starting at the beginning of the trailer here, it starts with the Green Army marching through the streets of King's Landing after getting back from Rook's Rest, parading Meleys' head on a cart for all the small folk to see, with pretty much everybody freaking out like, oh my god, it's a giant dead dragon's head. It seems like Aemond and Alicent are watching that procession from the Red Keep. He seems very proud of himself. Alicent seems kind of horrified. Like there's another scene that they released earlier this season of her looking at him all horrified, like he says something super edgy. Maybe he makes some comment about Rhaenys' death and what really happened with Aegon nearly dying. Like maybe she figures out that he was responsible for what happened to Aegon. She's actually talked to other people in previous episodes about what Aemond is capable of, basically saying that he's kind of a monster now and there's nothing that she can do about it. But it seems like he continues to make her more disgusted in him. The other important detail here, during their procession, you hear the crier of the Greens calling out, saying that it was actually Aegon that killed Meleys and Rhaenys and not Aemond. My guess is that Aemond told him to do that, and they want to give credit for this to Aegon so that he seems like a much bigger, more powerful figure, and maybe it will garner more support for the Greens just in general, and help turn around public opinion on them after the events of Blood and Cheese, with him hanging all the rat catchers. Because remember, Otto Hightower was super pissed, basically saying that he gave away all of the goodwill they had just earned with baby Jaehaerys' death procession. Part of the idea is that they want all the small folk to support them, also people around the realm, but this is mostly for the small folk. As the crier announces Aegon, we see the Greens carrying that box with him in it like a cart through the Red Keep. A lot of you probably guess why they have him in that weird looking box. Like, one, he can't walk, so they have to carry him, but also the reason why it's covered and it's long like that is because he's lying down, like he's essentially infirm and can't move. And also, they don't want any of the small folk to actually see him looking that weak. That was the whole reason why Otto Hightower didn't want him to go behind the procession with dead baby Jaehaerys. He didn't want the small folk to see him crying, so that the small folk assumed that he was this very strong leader. When really after that happened, he was a blubbering mess the way that anybody would after the death of their child. If it wasn't clear from the end of episode 4, Aegon's Valyrian armor was melted to part of his body, like melted literally into his skin. They had to remove it very, very carefully and very, very slowly. His whole body is mangled, like he has third-degree burns all over his body. I talked about this in my episode 4 video, but this is also proof that not all Targaryens are fireproof. They can all be burned. Daenerys is meant to be the only exception to that. That's why you saw Rhaenys getting super burnt, like all the singes all over her body. But in the fall, Aegon also broke a bunch of his bones and will basically have to spend the whole next year in his bed, hopped up on milk of the poppy, kind of like Viserys was at the end of his life. Doesn't this seem familiar now? A familiar sight for Alicent. That's why right after this scene, you see her walking into Viserys' old room where Aegon lives now. This is the bed that Viserys used to lie in when he was infirm his last couple years of his life. So rewind to season 1, this is exactly what it was like for Alicent towards the end of Viserys' life, just it happens to be her son now who's in the bed all infirm. Viserys spent most of his last years hopped up on milk of the poppy just because he was in so much pain. Earlier during episode 4, she was also telling Aegon about that, about how she was ruling in his stead with Otto Hightower's help while he was in that state, unable to do really anything because he was in so much pain. How ironic that it's now Aegon who is in that position now, basically so messed up that he won't be able to do anything for a long time. So a lot of Alicent's life has basically turned into caring for different sick men. Fun fact too, before she started spending time with Viserys when she was very young, learning about his Lego Valyrian sets, like we make all the Lego jokes, she was also the last person to ever see the old King Jaehaerys alive in his final years. She kind of did the same thing for him that she did for Viserys in his final years, serving as their caretaker. They've changed the timeline and the ages of some of the characters from the books. Like Alicent in the books is meant to be much older than Rhaenyra, which is how it's possible for her to be old enough to have been a young girl and caretaker to King Jaehaerys. But on the show, I don't think she's quite old enough for that to be reality. The show wanted Alicent and Rhaenyra to be about the same age, so Alicent wouldn't have been old enough to have seen King Jaehaerys die. You see this look of regret on Alicent's face over how she treated him before he went to Rook's Rest. My early theory right now is that's why Helaena forgave her in that previous episode, because it was for Rook's Rest. Like, she had seen Rook's Rest in one of her dragon dreams and knew what would happen to Aegon, and it was because Alicent made him feel like such a disappointment, basically like told him the worst possible thing a mother could tell their son. Rhaenyra then talks to the Black Council about the army that Daemon is trying to marshal in the Riverlands. We see Daemon in Caraxes meeting with the Brackens, telling them to bend the knee or he'll burn their entire house. That's what the Blackwoods demanded of him in exchange for their forces. Like, please burn their house. But it sounds like Daemon is giving them an opportunity to bend the knee. Daemon then looks like he's restoring Harrenhal, rebuilding the Hall of 100 Hearths here. That's the Great Hall. It was where they held the Great Council of 101 AC when King Jaehaerys was putting his succession to the vote during Season 1, Episode 1. There are a couple different whispery voices saying things to him while he's in bed in Harrenhal, in that Weirwood bed, having creepy visions. My guess is that the first voice is Rhaenyra, like the older Rhaenyra talking to him, but the second voice saying that he was made to wear a crown sounds like Laena's voice, who he just saw during episode 4. Then the Green Council notes that Aegon does not lack for heirs, as they show Aemond in his chair still at the opposite side of the table, but then he holds the white ball in the circle. That's the king's ball. That's the one that Aegon used to put in the circle whenever he was sitting on the small council, basically showing that he's becoming King Regent. The reason why it's Aemond and not Jaehaera, Aegon's daughter, or Alicent, his mother, should be obvious. It'd be like the Greens doing the same thing that they just usurped Rhaenyra to prevent. Up to this point so far, the tradition has been male primogeniture. That's why it passes to Aemond instead of a daughter. The whole Dance of the Dragons is happening now because they were trying to upend that, and Rhaenyra was trying to take the Iron Throne because Viserys named her his heir. So there's no way any of the Greens would ever want Alicent on the Iron Throne, or Jaehaera, who'd be way too young anyway. Alicent then comes back to the small council, like she's sitting on the small council again, gets more pissed off at Criston Cole, if that were even possible, saying that now he's cost her a son. Fun fact too, it's also possible that she was taking the moon tea during episode 4 because she was pregnant with one of Criston Cole's children. Criston Cole then says they've given the war to the dragons, meaning now that dragons are part of the war, the side with the most dragons will win. Like, it's all about dragons now. As they showed Jace's dragon, Vermax, watching him meet at the Twins on the bridge with Lord Frey. Then we see Aemond staring at the Iron Throne in the throne room. This doesn't seem like a vision either, like one of Daemon's trippy visions. This seems like Aemond actually is in the throne room watching the Iron Throne. There's some kind of chaos happening in the courtyard at the Red Keep. Mysaria then talks to Rhaenyra about how Viserys was viewed as a peacetime king, and that was a good thing. Part of the idea is that a lot of people on the show, especially in Season 2, have talked about his failings, like called him a weak king, pliable. People were able to bend him to their will. She wanted to take all the good things about her father, but not take any of his weaknesses. So part of the idea now, she's having this conversation with Mysaria in front of Meraxes, dragon skull there in Dragonstone, ruminating about the war. When she says the path that she's on has never been trod, she's talking about having such a big civil war within the Targaryen family and thinking about them having to take King's Landing. Maegor the Cruel is like the next best example of something like this happening, where there's like a fight within the Targaryen family over the succession, but that civil war wasn't nearly this big. Then we see Daemon putting in some manual labor himself, helping with the repairs to Harrenhal. We'll see where this winds up, just based on the timeline of him during the Dance of the Dragons. Like, it seems like he's doing an awful lot of work here for what winds up happening soon. There's a bunch more rioting of the small folk in King's Landing. Tywin Lannister, you remember, said that the crown was broke, so already that's bad, and the blockade is still up, meaning that they're probably out of food and people are starting to starve there. Beware the small folk at your own peril. They might not seem like that big of a threat right now, but they can really do a number on you when they all band together. There are a lot of small folk in King's Landing. Just open up a tab in Chrome for that, just remember the plight of the small folk. Then Mysaria says there's more than one way to fight a war, and they cut to a scene of one of the Brackens with Caraxes' mouth, like literally encompassing his entire, but I love the way they frame this shot, like Caraxes' head just completely encompasses him, like he's about to have himself a Bracken-sized snack, which Daemon basically said that he was about to do anyway. On the map table of Dragonstone, they knock over the piece that's on Rook's Rest to show them losing the battle recently, like they lost the castle. RIP to everyone again. Then Criston Cole says what they must do now is terrible. He might still be talking to Alicent, just like talking about having more big dragon battles, and all the collateral damage that comes with that. We saw a ton of it during Rook's Rest, but it's only going to get worse from here. There are a couple quick shots in a montage. We see Daemon in the hallways of Harrenhal, turning around quickly. Maybe he hears some more spooky voices. He looks kind of wary, like he's been like this on the regular since he's been at Harrenhal. Alicent looking pissed off at the small council meeting. Rhaenyra looks up in the sky like she's looking at one of the dragons. Then basically the trailer ends with them hyping up the dragons becoming a much bigger part of the actual war. Like not just a couple of dragons, but all the dragons. And there are several that we haven't seen in a while. So we'll probably start to hear them talk more about the Dragonseeds in the next couple of episodes towards the end of the season, like the other dragon riders that Rhaenyra starts looking for. People with Valyrian blood that are capable of riding dragons. Do we have any Targaryen bastards out in the realm anywhere? Anybody want to ride a dragon? Anybody at all? There've been a couple confirmed ones that we've seen on the show so far, a couple cameo scenes that I talked about in my previous episode videos. Currently the dragons that the Blacks have right now are Syrax, Rhaenyra's dragon, Daemon and Caraxes, Jace and Vermax, Baela and Moondancer, Joffrey and Taraxes, Aegon III and Stormcloud. There's other 3 dragon eggs, but don't expect those to hatch anytime soon. If the director of that episode is to be believed, those are meant to be Daenerys' dragon eggs, they wouldn't hatch for over 100 years. Then there's Vermithor, Silverwing, Sea Smoke, we have the 3 wild dragons, Grey Ghost, Sheep Stealer, the Cannibal, and the Greens only have right now Vhagar, Sunfyre, Dreamfire, Helena's dragon. Sunfyre is also still alive too, for those of you wondering. Gonna need to take some time to heal up for a while. Then there's also Daeron and Tessarion, who's almost old enough to actually fly into battle. Probably one of the other real big things that people will be talking about, especially after the last episode, is did Aemond actually mean to kill Aegon during Rook's Rest? Like, was he just looking for an excuse to kill him? Because there were a couple moments where, at the end of the episode, like he legit seemed like he was going to finish him off, pulling his sword on him, before Criston Cole showed up and told him not to do that. And during the actual battle, much earlier, it seems like he actually waited to enter the fight because he was hoping that Meleys would kill Aegon. You remember that after he accidentally killed Lucerys in Arax, he went back to King's Landing and said that he did it on purpose, so it's not above him to lie about what really happened at any particular battle. So had Meleys and Rhaenys actually killed Aegon, what he probably would have done then is flown in, tried to kill Rhaenys and Meleys so they couldn't tell anybody the truth. Then they would have gone back to King's Landing and blamed Aegon's death on Rhaenys. Here's the other thing too, because Aegon's still alive, do you wonder if he's going to tell everyone or remember that it was actually Aemond who Dracarys them right when he was in the path of the fire? Right before it happened, you could also see the look on Aegon's face like he knew what Aemond was about to do, like no. Tom Glenn Carney, who plays Aegon during the behind the scenes, also said that when he was falling from the sky there too, like after he'd been hit by the fire, it confirmed all of Aegon's worst fears about what Aemond was trying to do to him, usurp him, essentially. I think the only way that Aemond makes it out of this without him telling anyone, without Aegon telling anyone, is if he totally gets hopped up on Milk of the Poppy and is so messed up in his head, he can't remember anything. Aemond is hoping that he goes into a coma and just can't tell anybody anything about what really happened. But if there's any other Easter eggs or references you spotted in the trailer footage or in last week's episode that I didn't talk about in this video or my last video, just write them below in the comments and I'll add them to my bonus videos this week. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up. I'm working on a couple bonus videos. Make sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. My full episode 5 video will post Sunday after they release it too. Everybody click here for my full episode 4 video and click here for all my House of the Dragon episodes. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.